This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We turn now to look at how Black and brown communities are being disproportionately targeted and policed in New York City's response to the spread of COVID-19, and it's not just limited to New York. Data released Friday reveals more than 80% of summonses issued by the NYPD for social distancing violations have been to Black and Latinx people, and 92% of people arrested for not social distancing are non-white. Images circulated widely on social media showing a spotlight on uneven policing. Some show police officers distributing masks to white residents in crowded New York City parks, apparently arresting no one. Meanwhile, videos have emerged of violent crackdowns on social distancing measures in Black and Latinx neighborhoods. Earlier this month, cell phone video went viral showing police officers aggressively pinning a Black man to the ground as they arrested him, then violently attacking a Black passerby, dragging him on the street, punching him, and kneeling on his neck during what was supposed to be a social distancing enforcement action. The man who was attacked, the second man, 33-year-old Donnie Wright, was hospitalized with severe injuries to his back, ribs, and chest. The officer involved, Francisco Garcia, has since been put on modified assignment. Last week, the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office said 35 of 40 people arrested for social distancing violations were Black. Mayor Bill de Blasio has rejected comparisons to New York City's unconstitutional stop-and-frisk policies under former Mayor Bloomberg, but said in a tweet, "The disparity in the numbers does not reflect our values." Well, for more on racist policing, we are joined by an author and activist who was herself arrested by the New York Police Department on April 16th. She was writing Trump equals plague in chalk on a boarded-up building in her Washington Heights neighborhood in northern Manhattan. Jill Nelson was handcuffed and spent more than 5 hours in jail before being released. The 67-year-old scholar, writer, and activist, now being called the graffiti grandma, is speaking out against the NYPD. She's a longtime reporter, has written several books, including the autobiographical Volunteer Slavery, My Authentic Negro Experience, which won an American Book Award. She's a former professor of journalism at the City College of New York. Jill Nelson, welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us, but unfortunately under these circumstances.
Thank you.
Can you talk about what happened to you just under a month ago?
I went out to go to the drugstore and the supermarket, essential trips. I was walking from the drugstore down to Broadway to go to the supermarket when I saw a green, boarded up, empty for rent building. It was covered with plywood, and I wrote a piece of chalk in my pocket, and I wrote, "Trump equals plague." Before I could even step back, cops swooped in, cut me off made it out 2 cop cars, cut me off, jumped out. "What are you doing? What are you doing? You're under arrest." They searched me, asked me if I had weapons, told me to take my hands out of my pockets. It was a cold day, so I said no. Frisked me, shoved me into a police car, and took me to the 33rd precinct, where they put me in a cell and left me there for 5.5 hours. I took my shoes off. I had a mask, a fabric mask I had made on, but I demanded that they give me one of their more professional masks. They didn't allow me to make any phone calls. I was never read my rights. It was absurd, absolutely absurd, a total waste of time, energy, and this is in a community that has one of the highest rates of COVID, has many people who are poor and working poor, and there's something the police could have been doing besides attacking me for writing the truth. I have yet to have anyone disagree with what I said.
Let's go back to the beginning. Talk about the building that you were writing on. You were using chalk?
I was using chalk, washable chalk, and it was a boarded up front of a building when you build it out and cover it with plywood as if you're going to renovate, but it had a for rent sign. So it was not occupied by anyone.
And why did you choose that phrase?
Because he is a plague and a pox on all our houses. And
you were writing Trump equals plague?
Trump equals plague. Yes. I mean, it sums it up to me, what's going on, how it is, what's happening in this country and in the world. And we have a president who is aiding and abetting and telling us that as people of color and older people, we should just die, get out there and die for capitalism. It's ridiculous. There's so many disparities in healthcare, in treatment, in coverage. You know, I think the police are out of control. I think the mayor is afraid of the police. Instead of saying what he ought to say, which is, now I see how you feel, people of color, he's fronting for the police as always. Apparently, the only person he worries about is Dante.
Dante being his son.
His son.
And why do you say that?
Well, because it's always an excuse. I'm so tired of, I'm 67 years old. I was politicized by the killing of Clifford Glover when I was 18. This notion that it's only a few bad apples and that this isn't policy and that, the police are there to serve and protect. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't see it. I can't see how arresting me or rushing down those young men in Brooklyn serves any purpose. It doesn't make us safer. And I frankly feel that COVID-19 has been racialized, really, and it's now being used as a way to further oppress people of color. It's just absolutely wrong. The police aren't doing their job. What a waste. And
so, Jill Nelson,
I think we have to stand up and resist.
So describe what happened when the police moved in on you. You were wearing your mask. Were they wearing masks?
They were wearing masks. They were wearing gloves. They jumped in. I mean, you would have thought I was selling crack in the early 80s. The way they swooped down, it was seconds. They subsequently said, told someone that someone had called in a complaint. I find that hard to accept. It was between 15 and 30 seconds max between when I started writing and when the cops got there. What are you doing? We're gonna arrest you. Is this your property? Do you know what you're doing? Do you have any weapons? I said words. They didn't think that was funny or intelligent. They cuffed me roughly, shoved me into a police car, took my pocketbook, took me to the station, booked me, and then put me in a filthy cell for 5.5 hours. I wasn't read my rights. I wasn't offered the right to make a phone call.
You weren't able to make a phone call?
No. Eventually, I'm sorry, at 3 o'clock, this was after being there a couple of hours, they told me I could call and try to get my husband because I didn't have a photo ID and they needed that to release me. But they dialed my home number. When my husband answered, the guy after 50 seconds the cop says, I'm going to cut you off. After a minute, boom, cut me off. So my husband had no idea what precinct I was in.
You hadn't gotten a chance to say where you were yet.
No, and they had told me to tell him that they would send a cop car by my apartment, which is 10 blocks away, to pick up my ID. My husband put my license in an envelope, went downstairs and waited for 40 minutes. And they never came to get it. Then he came back upstairs, figured out where I was, came to the precinct, dropped off my ID. I didn't even know that until I happened to see my identification in a plastic evidence bag and was like, has my husband been here? Where is he? And they were like, oh, yeah, he came a while ago. You couldn't have seen him anyway.
Which police station were you being held in? Which community?
The 33rd Precinct in Washington Heights.
So did they threaten to bring you to central booking, to bring you downtown?
Yes, because I didn't have ID, and they wouldn't either go pick up my ID, or I had offered early on, drive me to my house. You can come up to my apartment. I'll give you my ID. They told me they were going to take me downtown, and that if they took me downtown, I'd probably be there all night. And when they finally released me, Amy, the desk sergeant said, and be sure to show up for your desk appearance ticket, or else we'll come to your house and arrest you. The whole thing was
Jill Nelson, we're
Yes,
going to
ma'am.
break, and we're going to also be joined by your lawyer, Norman Siegel, former head of the New York Civil Liberties Union, and talk about this issue. These are the kinds of issues you write about, not only in New York City, but all over the country. We're talking to the author, activist, former professor, Jill Nelson, 67 years old, lives in the Washington Heights area of New York City, and was handcuffed by police after they moved in on her for graffitiing on a boarded-up building. Trump equals plague. Stay with us.